Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally going to test out not only the super popular watercolor sheets by Viviva that you might have seen on Instagram or YouTube to see if it's worth the hype, but I will also test out the Peerless watercolors that come in sheets as well and that you guys have mentioned in my previous video. But what are those watercolor sheets? The Viviva and the Peerless watercolor sheets are watercolors that are made out of heavily pigmented dyes and come in some sort of a paper or cardboard type surface. To be able to use them, you only have to touch and activate them with a wet brush. The Viviva watercolors were actually a Kickstarter campaign from not so long ago by Diva, the founder of Viviva Colors from India. The Peerless watercolors, on the other hand, have been around for quite some time. They were developed in 1885 by Chas Nicholson and first published in booklet form in 1902 and were actually made not only for creating art, but mostly for tinting and coloring photographs, cinema films, slides, and wherever transparent colors are required. So the Viviva watercolors come in a small booklet. Inside the book are 4 sections with 2 colors on top and on the bottom of the page, making a total of 16 colors. The colors are color-coded through the strips along the bottom, creating an index so colors can be easily found inside the book. The slightly transparent paper in between the pages is water-resistant and protects the color from sticking together. The Viviva watercolors and its 16 transparent watercolors currently come for a price of $18.90 if you get the single set, which makes $1.80 for each color. According to the website and the developer himself, they are made out of mineral dyes and they're supposed to last for a long time, comparable to a half pan coverage. The Peerless watercolor sheets also come in a booklet, but the size of one sheet is about the same size as around 3 sheets of the Viviva watercolors. The complete edition of the original set of colors contains 15 colors, but you can buy additional packs of colors, so the complete library of current colors contains 78 colors. The booklet also comes with an introduction, instructions, and further information as a copy of the original vintage text from the 1902 version. On the page facing each color is the color name, as well as information about the color and its uses so you can learn more about it. You can get the Peerless Watercolor Complete Edition book and its 15 colors for $16, which makes $1.06 for one individual color. Now let's finally see the watercolors in action. The first thing I did, I swatched every color one by one using the area below each sheet in the Viviva booklet. What I noticed is that some colors were immediately super saturated and vibrant, but some colors needed a little bit more scrubbing. To me, it felt like the yellow and the more orange colors needed a little bit more work to get the paint to be as saturated as possible. This is why it can be a little bit tricky to get the right amount of paint, because sometimes you just get too much paint onto your brush even though you just slightly touch the watercolor sheet. After I got an overview of all the colors the booklet had to offer, I went ahead and swatched all the different colors again on a separate piece of paper. Here I wanted to not only see how the lighter values would look when I dilute the paint with water, but also wanted to create a color wheel with all the colors to get a better overview of the colors. I don't know why, but I always need the colors in order or my head just feels weird. In the next step, I cut out the swatches and arranged them similar to a color wheel. It might not be 100% accurate, but to me it made sense this way. This way I can see the whole range of colors and their different values at one glance. Here I left out the gray color and just focused on the rest. It was really easy to distribute the paint and to blend them nicely from dark to light. As you can see, the colors are indeed transparent because you can see the written text really clearly. And here you can also see that almost half of the set has yellowish colors, from yellow, orange to brown colors. Then we have a few different reds, blues, and greens, and one gray color. And because for some reason I had to be a little bit more extra, I wanted to see what other colors I can create by mixing them together. First, I created a grid. On the left and on the top, I wrote down all the colors of the palette and then mixed them all together one by one. So basically, I took one color and mixed it with every other color in the set to create different colors, and then moved on to the next color. It took a while and halfway through I kind of regret my life decisions, but what you can see here is that if you were thinking of mixing different colors, they will be rather red or yellowish and very warm colors in general because the color choice of the set is rather on the warm side. But this set is meant for on the go, so I don't think you would actually go ahead and mix all those colors together. It was just an experiment, so let's move on. With the Peerless watercolors, I did the same thing. I swatched them one by one to get an overview of the different colors, and I also felt like they were easy to activate with water. The amount of paint and scrubbing you had to do to get the right amount of paint was rather similar to the Viviva sheets because I personally didn't notice any huge difference. Here to me, the transition between the different colors is a little bit more sudden as they have less colors in between to make the transition more seamless. But as I mentioned earlier, there are additional packs of color sheets you can buy, so I'm only judging the color range of this edition. Once I swatched all the colors and cut them out and arranged in a color wheel, I went ahead and created an actual color wheel using all those colors. Here I left out two colors such as sepia and gray. Again, it might not be completely 100% accurate, but I think it still gives you a nice overview of the different colors in the set. Here I felt like the paint was a little bit harder to distribute evenly compared to the Viviva sheets. I had to go back and forth to make the transition between dark and light as smooth as I can. Now, if you compare those two color wheels, you can see that the Viviva sheets have a nice transition between the yellows, reds, and blue colors, while the transition between the Peerless colors looked a little bit more sudden. And just from looking at the color wheel of the Viviva color sheets, I think it's just so beautiful. The colors are vibrant and it's just pleasant to the eye. And after spending so much time mixing all the different colors in the Viviva color sheet, I decided I won't do this again with the Peerless watercolors. So let's just move on and actually paint something. First in the test was the Viviva watercolor sheets. Here I used a watercolor sketchbook and simply used all the colors the Viviva sheets had to offer. If you are on the go and you only have the colors, a brush, and a little bit of water, I think this set can be a good idea if you, for example, have only a little bit of time to catch a certain scene, or in this case, a sunset, because the colors will change so quickly. I noticed that the colors dry rather fast, so whenever I wanted to blend in new paint, sometimes I couldn't create a nice transition between the two colors because it kind of created a messy pattern as it will push away the drier paint, which I noticed in a few tests I did when I tried the glazing technique on top of the dry paint. Here I applied a few lines over the swatches using different colors, and I noticed that sometimes the paint got a little bit reactivated and pushed away. So instead of having a nice wash on top of the dry layer of paint, you kind of created an outline area, if that makes sense. Now the Peerless watercolors are a little bit less convenient because they don't have this paper in between that prevents the colors to stick to each other, and it might be more difficult to find the right color because there is no index in the booklet. But there are different ways how you can use those color sheets. The first way is to simply cut off a little piece of the color sheet and place them into a mixing palette. And then you can add a little bit of water and activate the paint on the paper to dissolve it with water. This way you can create different colors in your mixing palette, adjust the intensity by using more or less water or paint, and then paint as you would normally do with watercolors. But what a lot of artists do, they actually create their own palettes. You can cut off bigger pieces of the colored sheets and add them to an extra piece of paper. I've seen people creating folded pages as a palette with a divider in between to protect the colors. This way you can not only create your own customized palette, but you can also take it with you on the go the same way as the Viviva color sheets. Now, after painting back and forth with the Viviva watercolor sheets, I realized my hands were so messy. Because the paint couldn't dry in time, my hands got so much paint, so much dye on it, and it was so hard to get rid of everything. The Peerless watercolor set, on the other hand, were a little bit less messy. I think the major part was here that the colors dried a lot more quickly. Whenever I added a little bit of water to the Viviva color sheets, it took some time for it to dry. So when I flipped the pages back and forth, the paint was still wet and it was a lot easier to make the hands look really messy. But even though the Peerless watercolors were a lot less messy, they can also stain everything that it comes in contact with, if you're not careful. Now, one of the major things of both sets is that all those colors are dye-based, which means they are not light-fast, which means the colors can fade over time when exposed to sun. But it always depends on how you store your paintings. If you only want to use those colors in your sketchbook, or if you want to just scan them into your computer, it might not be an issue for you. But if you want to create art to sell or to hang up your wall or anything else that is outside your sketchbook, I personally would be careful because you never know how the colors will look in the end. All in all, I think the major difference between the Viviva watercolor sheets and the Peerless watercolor sheets is that the Viviva watercolors are more convenient. While you can make the Peerless watercolor sheets into a customized palette that you can take on the go, Viviva color sheets are already ready to go. As I said earlier, I think that the Viva watercolor sheets can make a great set for traveling, and it can indeed make a fun gift. And for the Viva watercolors, even though the website states that the colors will last you a long time, as long as a half pan of regular watercolors, you might have the same problem as I had with the yellows, the oranges, and the brown colors because they ran out really quickly. The reds and blues and other colors were indeed very pigmented, and I can see that they can last you a long time. But if you run out the yellows, oranges, and the brown tones, there is no way to just replace them and keep painting. So for this price, I think I would rather invest this money into a regular watercolor set for traveling, such as the Winsor & Newton Cotman set for sketching, because you can also take it on the go. It's easy to use. You can mix any color you like. It's less messy, and most importantly, you can switch out the colors whenever you need. The Peerless watercolor sheets were a lot bigger, so the yellow tones might last you a longer time. And because they offer additional packs for the set, you can buy and replace some of the colors as well. So if you like the idea of watercolor sheets, the convenience and the idea of creating a customized palette in a folder that you can take with you on the go, or just neatly put it into a shelf, while being able to add new colors to your collection, the Peerless watercolor sheets can be an alternative for you. So as you can see, both sets have the pros and cons, and it's up to you to decide which you prefer. For more watercolor videos and reviews, you can check out the videos right here. I really hope you liked this video and found it helpful. Let me know in the comments what was your favorite set and if you're actually considering buying any of those sets. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye!